Today we're going to cover a few problems with prepared statements when scaling large applications. So what is a prepared statement? Basically, this over here is a prepared statement, and you can tell by this little question mark over here. So prepared statement is a feature of modern databases that are intended to help you execute the same SQL statement, like this one, multiple times. So basically, the application will send this statement to the database, and then afterwards, it will tell the database to execute this statement, providing a value for this parameter. So it can execute this statement multiple times, each time providing a different value. So this query is kind of simple. The benefit of prepared statements is if you have a long, complex query that takes time to compile and optimize, we can tell the database to compile and optimize it ahead of time, and then subsequently the application will come in and simply provide the parameters and execute. So another benefit of prepared statements is the protection they provide against SQL injection. So SQL injection is an attack where the attacker may try to insert a different SQL statement. But in this case, because it's a prepared statement, the database will effectively validate that whatever is provided here is just a parameter. It'll just use it as a value and not as a separate SQL statement. So this makes it a little bit easier for application developers because they don't need to completely properly escape the parameter that is passed to the actual statement. But there's an issue. By always using prepared statements for accessing the database, the SQL driver has to send the extra prepare command for each statement. So this is what the driver will do. It'll prepare the statement, execute it, and then close the statement. So this prepare part in the beginning will be executed every time, even if the statement is closed. And by closing the statement, we will deallocate this prepare statement. So basically, when experts suggest to always use prepare statements, they're basically saying, okay, we're going to prepare the statement, but it's going to be short-lived because after we execute it, we are just going to deallocate that prepare statement. So this is a little bit of a performance issue. Another issue with prepared statement is the memory requirement, especially in large application deployments with large numbers of connections. One thing to note is that a single prepared statement is only valid for a single session, right? So if you have multiple sessions and a session is typically maps to a single connection, basically every prepared statement you want to save is going to be saved for every connection you have opened. So let's try to run some numbers. So here's an example. Suppose we have an application that is trying to scale. So we've got 100 application servers, 100 connections that each one of those servers can have to the database. And we estimate about 50 kilobytes per prepared statement. So if we multiply all these together, we get 500 megabytes, and this is for a single prepared statement. So some databases, for example, MySQL, has a max prepared statement count, and it defaults to 16,382. In the previous example, we saw 100 application servers, 100 connections. So multiplying these two will be 10,000, right? And what did we see earlier? If we're using short-lived prepared statement, that means each connection, each session will be preparing a statement. So if we have 10,000 connections, there's going to be 10,000 prepared statements used. So if you want, in addition to these, to save additional prepared statements, and you have 10,000 connections, 10,000 for the short-lived prepared statements plus 10,000 more is 20,000. And you're already going over this limit. So what happens? The application cannot execute SQL statements and the application crashes and your customers leave you. So this is quite an annoyance, kind of extremely inconvenient for application developers, right? Application developers, they must keep track of the number of saved prepared statements they create in their code. They have to know how many application servers they're running. They have to know how many database connections each one of those has. And they have to know if the database has any sort of limit on the prepared statements. So in the end, is it really worth even using prepared statements, considering, potential hole you can get yourself into? I mean, the answer is yes, the prepared statements do offer performance benefits, specifically for complex queries that are executed frequently. Here's some ways to kind of help mitigate the situation with prepared statements. So one thing is we can limit the number of connections per application server. In the previous example, I said 100 connections per server, and that is actually fairly large. Sometimes if your application servers are, small in size, you may only want to use like 10 database connection per application server. So basically limiting the number of connections limits the number of prepared statements the server needs to keep, right? Because there's one per session. Another thing you can do is simply increase the prepared statement limit, right? And this is like the simplest thing you can do. The danger here is if you increase it too much and your application ends up using going up to this limit. Remember in the previous example, it was 0.5 GB per saved prepared statement, right? So if you increase this too much and the application is saving prepared statements right and left, I mean, you can easily go, tens, 100 gigs. Another thing you can do, this is not a complete solution, but it may help, is to limit the maximum lifespan of connection. It is possible to have your connections live indefinitely, right? And that means whenever a connection creates a prepared statement, that prepared statement is going to be on the server forever, right? But by limiting the lifespan of connection to maybe a few minutes, once the connection is closed, any prepared statements associated with that connection are going to be deallocated by the database. Yeah, so I think this is a good practice to make sure you're always limiting your lifespan of connections. To deallocate memory for prepared statements and, potentially solve some issues if you have maybe spikes in traffic and you need to close some connections and get rid of the prepared statements.